Hello, LinkedIn friends. Thank you so much for joining us on this fantastic Friday evening or Saturday, wherever you are on this day. Thank you for taking time to spend with us in this conversation that we're calling The Lost Art of Lean Leadership. And this really is an experiment for all of us here. And so, James and Andres, glad to be here with you today. Unfortunately, Paul wasn't able to make it today. But we're looking forward to a good conversation, and we'd love for you to all chime in. Let us know where you're coming in from today, and just any thoughts you have on lean leadership. We're going to talk about vulnerability today. So, James, Andres, how are you doing today?
Doing well, my friend. How are you doing, Andres? Good to see you.
Doing well. Thank you, James. Thank you, Sam. Happy Friday and happy Saturday to all of the listeners. Yeah, glad to be here, Sam and James, to talk about this important topic.
Yeah, I think we've, for those who aren't, familiar, maybe we could just take like 10 seconds to introduce ourselves. We don't want it to be anything about that. We want this to be like a conversation. Um, so maybe for those who aren't familiar, we could just do like a real quick introduction, and then we could, and maybe just like a connection to the topic around lean leadership and vulnerability and what, has you interested. We want this to be more like a conversation, like we're sitting around a bar after a conference or after work, and we're kind of, BSing about these kind of topics. So, James, you want to kick us off there?
Yeah, you bet. So this is a topic near and dear to me. I've been in the space of lean continuous improvement for the past 20 years. And over the last probably 6 years, I've really been focused on sort of um, the mental side, the inner game of improvement. And so this is something that has really resonated. I think we hear this speak, psychological safety, the importance of providing those meaningful elements into change, and so it's conversation I don't think you can have too much of.
Nope. Nope. Don't think so. Don't think so. I think that we could use more of it in our community and in the broader culture at large. Easy for me to say. Andres, what about you?
Hey, everybody. My name is Andres Salamillo, and I'm a continuous improvement leader. Been in the space for about 10 years now, but in leadership since, I don't know, 2006, 2007 in that space. And, and so championing and leading change efforts can be challenging and difficult, and especially when there's a mixture of opinions or thoughts, or sometimes not clear what's in it for me. So definitely, like James said, that change management and just being open and honest with oneself's either competency skills or that's a space that I really think I think we can explore through this conversation of just how can we get to a space where we're open with ourselves, and then opening our hearts and minds for new ideas and being vulnerable with that. I think that's really kind of the key. What about you, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I think just as somebody in the lean space, and just as a father, as a husband, I think it's been said that the way you are one place is the way you are everywhere. So I think as we talk about this conversation around vulnerability in the lean space, I think um, we most of us that would be here, or maybe would be in that space, but I think it behooves us to be thinking in that way, right? If we are talking about being vulnerable as a lean leader, as somebody in the C suite, wherever, as a CI practitioner, whatever it might be, we practice these not only within the four walls or our home office or whatever, but also with their family and friends. And I think that that's the thing that I'm, most passionate about is seeing this as a way of thinking and acting, right, in every aspect of our life. But I think because of the context of where we're at, that it's important for us. So, and maybe just kind of the best way to start the conversation. And it's good to see you all here chiming in from all around the world, from Australia to BC to Iowa. It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Lynn and Graham and Andy, for chiming in. And would love to hear from the rest of you all as we continue in this conversation, and especially with this first question too, because it really us coming together. We started kind of exploring these these topics of vulnerability, which you don't hear about in like a broader professional sense a lot. And we're like, man, it would be great to just have a more like maybe a more public conversation, because we were enjoying it. And it was like, well, how can we have that together? And so I'd love to kick it off. Andres, maybe we can start with you around, vulnerability and what that means to you, because we toss around these words a lot. And I think we like, oh, well, that's vulnerability. It's like, well, yeah, but what is it? What does it mean? If we're going to strive for something, we ought to know what that is. And as we chat about it, would love for you all to comment and share what your thoughts are in the chat as well, to kind of have a more communal conversation. But what would you say, Andres, is your, what do you define it as, or what does it look like for you?
I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of like in the most kind of nerdy kind of way, right? Like you go to the Webster dictionary and it's defined as the state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed. But it could be physically or emotionally. That's kind of like the Webster dictionary. But then if we take it even further, right, is as a leader, I think we're asked as leaders to, watch out for the well-being of the people in our span of care. And so we're always pushed into these vulnerable states, but at the same time we're asked to sometimes know all the answers. And so there's like this fine balance of balancing those, knowing the answers and saying I don't know. And so for me, saying I don't know is the most raw state of being vulnerable, being exposed to what if I don't know, right? Is that a reflection on my lack of competency? Is that a reflection on my lack of depth on this topic, right? So I think for me, it is that definition of saying I don't know and just being vulnerable in that aspect.
Anybody else in the chat want to raise their hand and under like as that as a as a something that they could resonate with? I know I am here for sure. James, what about you? What does it mean to you? What does it look like for you?
Yeah, you know what, like that is, Andres, like that is it, right? Like it's putting yourself in that position where you are very raw, and I think human, right? Like it's really tough. I think we're groomed to when we get into positions of leadership, either formally or informally, that as you said, like we've got to have the answers, and there is just such a powerful thing when you're around someone who says, I don't know, what do you think, or the ability to say, I made a mistake. Like to be vulnerable in the space to say, what, I think we could have gone a different way there, and then just showing up authentic. But again, like that, we're talking about it from like the leadership perspective, is we have to provide that space. But from a leadership perspective, if you haven't cultivated that team that gives you that permission to be safe as well, it's not one or the other, it's all, and so modeling the behavior, like we're not going to get it right. Like we're going to say things here today that some people will agree with, some people will disagree with, and some, it's okay. And I think you've got to be able to muddle through situations in a way that you can be okay to not be okay.
I think it's interesting too, because we're all in kind of different kind of roles. Andres, I know you're like a CI leader. James, you kind of hold the CI leader, and you've got your own coaching. And me, I'm kind of fully in the coaching, right? An entrepreneur. So, I love this kind of mix of perspectives here. And it's interesting because John just chimed in with this comment here, and I think it behooves, like I think it kind of takes it to where we wanted to have this conversation is, what does it enable? Like, what does it actually help do? Why should I even effing give it? Like, why should I do it? Because, I think a lot of leaders would be like, well, what does that help me do? What's in it for me? And so thank you, John, for adding that question, because I think that's really important. So what do you all think? Like, how do you think of this question, like in terms of understanding, embracing, and vulnerability? What does it enable? Or why should someone care?
I think
Andres, James, what do you think?
yeah, if you don't mind, I think for me particularly, when we're talking about continuous improvement and problem solving, right? In this topic of vulnerability really resonates, because you have to be okay with the fact that the improvement that you're going after, we might not know all the answers, we might not know the perfect outcome, we might not know the outcome at all, right? But it requires that sense of kind of just shedding that skin of like, I know it all, to be able to even open the doors to experimentation, to the possibility of what else is on the table, right? If we do this improvement. So I think it sets the tone for the rest of maybe the experimentation or the project, to be able to say, you know what, we don't know, and and we're going to invest some resources, money, time, whatever that is, to try to get to that, right? But I think that's where that creativity and all of that can actually happen, if we step back and say, we're gonna take this next step without even knowing what's possible, and then learn from it. I think so. So I think a big piece here is that learning that you get from saying, I don't know, that big learning that you get from being vulnerable and open to new ideas and thoughts. At least that's from my seat, where I sit as a CI manager, right? That you have to be able to shed that skin off, right?
Yeah.
And John was just saying too, just to transition there, he's talking like he's just sharing some appreciation about that questioning method you're talking about, Andres, being curious and asking questions, and that requires us being vulnerable and saying, I don't have the answer. What do you think, James?
Yeah, no, I was gonna riff off that. Like, anyone that's had a conversation with me will be tired of me saying this, but I'm a massive believer in beginner's mind. And within Zen, Shinryu Suzuki said, in the beginner's mind, the opportunities are endless, and in the experts, they are few. And I think if we can approach things from that beginner's mind, it enables that curiosity, and that openness allow you to start getting into the realm of entering into the possibilities of getting in flow. And if you can do that, and the juices start flowing, and then it creates this beautiful dynamic. But it's just taking those initial steps to just set that stage. And again, like the ability to cultivate that curiosity through vulnerability, I think is it's a beautiful thing. It's a tough thing, but
yeah, I mean, Andy was saying, that it has him comfortable when somebody says, I don't know. And I think that, like, for me, there's a tension there for me, Andy, when I think about it. And I know, knowing Andy, and there are others here who've been in this space as well, whether as a leader or as an entrepreneur. Part of my work as an entrepreneur is to build, authority. Like, you can trust me. And so I think that there's a tension for me there with vulnerability. What is the line that you, because if you're asking somebody to trust you to support them and help them move forward in a place where they're stuck, how do you do that? Right? How do you gain trust that somebody can support you and help you move to where you want to get to? If you're like, well, I don't know. Right. So there's a tension for me there with that. And I don't know if you all have some thoughts on that. I know, Lynn, thank you too for sharing about the whole idea of, that acknowledging uncertainty. Right. and the possibility of being wrong. And because we do have that. I think you're right, Lynn. I think that feeling for me, as as you're sharing there, as I'm talking about it, is like that feeling of, oh, nobody's going to want to work with me, and then the rejection, and then if I don't make money, then what happens at home, the fear of rejection there, and all of those pieces. I think it is that's real. That's just the reality of it, that we maybe don't say it out loud, but if you go backwards and peel back the onion, that's the reason why, right? So
Yeah. I think one of the things that is playing in the back of my mind right now is that within this conversation, vulnerability doesn't equal weakness. And I
say it
think
again
that
for the
we
people in
have
the
to,
back, baby.
vulnerability does not equal weakness. I think we show so much strength, but within that strength, I think we have to come from a place of understanding purpose. Simon Sinek will always preach why. That why is really important, because when you have that clearly defined purpose, it acts as that true north that you can be vulnerable, because I'm okay giving up the reality that I won't have all the answers. I may have made mistakes, but you know what? I need to get, I believe in where we're going. Can we all get there together? But we've got to cultivate that awareness of that purpose, because I think without that purpose, it can come across sort of aimless. I do believe that there's a strong place within the space of vulnerability to have a conversation, and maybe that conversation is just saying, I don't know what that looks like right now, and just being honest to say I'm a bit lost in finding that purpose, but within that creates that space for direction.
And I think, Greg, thanks for chiming in. Good to see you. I appreciate this thought. And I think it aligns with what you're saying there, Greg, talking about we're in this together versus don't mess this up, right? Like if you're supporting somebody, and to your point about purpose, if you're clear together about the purpose of where why you're doing it and where you're headed to, then you're walking side by side, right? You're supporting them in that work on a common mission to help them get to X destination, right? So I appreciate that perspective from what you're sharing, James and Greg. Andres, is there anything else that's coming up for you here around that, like maybe purpose, moving forward, having that common mission or goal? I know, like in all of our conversations, you are very much in the work you do with Smith Gardens. You're very much in that with the leadership, right? Like you're always, I feel like you're really good at having that perspective on the purpose of what you're doing. So I'm curious to know what comes up for you with that.
Maybe not so much along the lines of the clear with purpose, but definitely with what you said, James, about vulnerability does not equal weakness. I was thinking the same thing, because the more vulnerable I am, right, I have to be able to trust that receiving end, right? I have to be able to trust that the person that is hearing me be vulnerable or seeing me be vulnerable needs to treat that and handle that with care, in a sense, right? And that doesn't happen through a meeting or a series of meetings. It happens over time, right? Through relationship building, through building some level of trust with either that group, that team, or that individual. So because yeah, I feel the tension from your side, Sam, of like, I if I'm too vulnerable, right, with the wrong, maybe not, let me reframe that, not the wrong, but the with that lack of respect or that trust, that could be easily, they could turn into something else. So I just, that really resonated with me in terms of like, it does not equal weakness, but it does come with I think it does come with a price if not not in the safe space. So yeah, and I think and to cultivate that, I guess for me, what I've been seeing in an organization and just in family life is being able to model that, right? Being able to see modeled at meetings or at workshops or whatever, right? And once it's modeled, I think it's easier to go next, right? There was an example that happened recently. I'll just share a quick story here. Right after the election, and last week, right, there was a moment where there was some tension, right, and there was a workshop that happened right afterwards, and one of our leaders said, before we get started with our workshop, let's talk about the elephant in the room. And some of you are happy with the decision, some of you are not, and it doesn't matter where you are in that spectrum. I just want to make sure that when we are in this meeting, we respect each other, we treat each other with that dignity, right? If you want to talk about it afterwards, outside of this room. And so I think that level of vulnerability and saying, hey, let's talk about this kind of, or let's not ignore this topic, but let's be mindful of that, I think really sets the tone for others going next, and maybe next time they have to go through and facilitate a workshop in a maybe not so a prime time, right? So I think just that modeling for me is so important for it to be, because I could say, Sam, James, be courageous, model vulnerability, but at the end of the day, we have to see it. We have to know what that looks like, what that feels like, right?
Yeah.
And I think Greg brings up a good point here too when we're talking about that vulnerability. What's what is the line, between that? Because of course you could share all your history, right, with someone, or you could share, like, you could open up about so much, and or you could like be super close and not share anything. So I think that there's, to your point, Greg, finding that space of I think the word that I really like, Andres, Greg, you used the word relatable. I like the word courageous, right? Brave. And maybe people could parse out the difference there. But being afraid, right? And then moving through that, I think is kind of maybe more the piece I think we're talking about here. Maybe James, you could hop in on that, because I feel like I know early on in my years, people have said, Sam, the reason why we like engage with you and relate is because you are authentic, you're genuine, and which I appreciate. And also early on in my, maybe my college years, I was very much just like, I just shared everything, and to Greg's point, like I overshared. And so now for me, it's like, how do you pull that back to a place where you're authentic and vulnerable, but not like, God, I'm sharing all my shit, like that's,
Yeah.
so yeah, I just appreciate
No,
that
I
perspective, and curious to know.
yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think it's um it's vulnerability, or even just the ability to be human in the moment for the reason that you're there. Um, not just turning up and just randomly sharing, but specifically for the purpose of what the conversation is like. And I think it's just being, right down to the very most basic thing. I know that, within my day to day at the hospital, within the team, I'm really fortunate to support. Um, if I'm having a bad day, or if I'm coming in and I'm feeling a certain way, I let my team I let my team know it. I don't need to go into all the details, but I might just be able to say, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna let going through X right now, and really appreciate if for some reason you think I'm coming across short or anything like that. It's not. Just I think the ability to be human with each other creates a level of trust, and within that trust, again, it gives you that ability to be um, authentic, and then drive your support your team in a very real way. And I think that those moments are really important. We can relate it back from a to an improvement perspective, something that we're all familiar with is problem solving, right? Like everything we do is about the ability to come together and solve problem, work through things together. Well, if you aren't creating that space where people feel that they can have trust, that they can speak up openly and not feel like they're going to get shut down, if you can't create that space, you're not going to be able to achieve the results that you want to achieve. And so that is a critical piece. But again, it's knowing that balance. It's not just aimless vulnerability, is purposeful intent.
I think that. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's just like John was sharing there. It's like the essence of lean is experimentation, right? Curiosity and experimentation. And it's to your point there, James, about if we haven't created that, having that culture, which is kind of like the gold standard of what we all talk about, in as practitioners, is we've created this culture where people feel safe to go experiment, and try things, and the leaders remove the obstacles, So I feel like that's definitely a good indicator that you've created that, right? To your point, John, like there's experiments going on. But yeah, Andres, what were you reflecting on?
I was just going to piggyback on the showing up authentic with your team. I think I sometimes struggle with the saying of fake it till you make it, and I struggle with that. Even though I don't know, maybe it served a purpose for some folks, but for me that kind of showing up or that mindset, I struggle because when you're trying to build trust, when you're trying to develop relationships, meaningful and lasting relationships, I think not showing up 100% yourself almost is counterproductive with that, right? So definitely, I resonate with that, James, in terms of like showing up and just being open with whatever's happening, right? Whether it's at home or at work, just showing up for who you really are every day, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of a scenario when it was probably like 24 or 25 years ago. I'd just been engaged twice to the same gal, not my now wife, but we were engaged and going through counseling. And after she broke up with me the second time, I decided to continue on with the counseling. And one of the things we talked about is just being able to like grow in confidence, I think is what we were talking about, and how sometimes like you talked about, Andres, the fake it till you make it, and he talked about this idea of putting we put a mask on. It can kind of feel like that, in terms of confidence, like we are feigning confidence, like we're an actor in a play. But how when we do that, like it can actually create, by acting in that way, it can create genuine confidence, versus like false, right? A false sense of confidence or arrogance in another way. So it's definitely an interesting perspective, because I think, vulnerability can be, can come out of a place that isn't healthy either, because we can have arrogance, right? A place that maybe it doesn't create something valuable, but then we can also have like a transparency that doesn't do that either. Right? It's not helping anybody, and it's really coming out of insecurity, versus where I feel like vulnerability actually can come from a real place of strength and confidence. Like, I'm going to be okay if I share this, right? Like the world's not going to come down around me. My wife's still here. My kids still love me. I still have clients who, trust me to help them, and I think that like, I'm really like speaking to myself now about that. I think it's important, right, to remind ourselves of that reality.
Yeah, I was reading something the other day from Stephen Covey, and he was talking about managing your internal weather. And like if the weather outside is cloudy, and it impacts the way that you feel, right? And but we can, as soon as the sun comes out, all of a sudden, like we're happy, and we're cultivating that sort of positive energy. And I think knowing that within ourselves, having that ability to be self-aware as well. Again, like if we're not aware of how we're feeling, and we're trying to potentially like fake through that, or not turn up in some way that is just not going to take you down the right path. That's a tough space to be. And I think if we can you know be aware of our mood. Again, I use the example of just being open with where you're at. Again, that doesn't mean coming in there and just like letting everyone have it with where you're at. It's just being aware of yourself, right? And giving yourself to come back to that space of calm within ourselves, so that we can respond to situations instead of react to situations.
Mm.
It's not just like this topic is vast. That's why we don't have it just like, if it was so easy to just read the books and go out and apply it, we wouldn't be having the conversations. I think
Yeah.
it's real life. It's real life. And so being able to turn up is not just doing one thing or the other. It starts within. It's generating that awareness of self, so that you can turn up, and you can be vulnerable, because you're aware of what that means. It's not just being just again, just letting go of everything within. It's purposeful, like it's very purposeful. But within, again, I come back to within the realm that we are in of improvement, where we are coming in and dealing with really challenging situations, complex situations often. Um, we have to address that up front. And so, like this conversation of vulnerability, creating that psychological safe space, um, we're not going to get it right all the time. It's we're just not. And so, just being able to have these conversations, so that we can hear each other speaking, and through the mess of what we're all saying, there's pieces in there that will resonate with each other, and that will land, and hopefully, um, you're all hearing that there's a genuine sense of us trying to work through what this actually means in real life, so that we can take it away from this conversation and experience it, and try and be aware of that.
And I think it's so important that we do that, right? That we, number one, we don't, feel like we walk away from this. Okay, now, either we feel like, oh my gosh, I've got so much, so like I'm so far away from being in this space, and no wonder everything's not working out for me and all that, like that. I think like this is hopefully like our hope is like it continues on, whether that's in this space again, we're not sure, but whether that's at home or with your team, but like starting these conversations so that you can, when you um so you can do it. Greg mentions here, like we can experiment in every way, right, in any space in our life. And I think, that like if you're like, man, this is going to be so hard to do with my team, well, then start at home, right? That's what,
Mm-hmm.
what you do, right? Start with a friend you trust, right? Start with, your partner. I think that those are all places we can start. But the real important part is to like start practicing it in a way, right? Because you're not going to get into a space where you feel grounded, James. And I love the frame of accepting and centered and present, and then being vulnerable out of that. We can't do
Mm-hmm.
that if we don't practice it. It doesn't just
Right.
happen overnight. Not
So
all of us can be as ripped as Paul. We could not get there overnight if we wanted to, right? It takes time to practice that. Same with being I'm trying to come up with like another picture of someone who's like strong at being vulnerable.
Yeah, it is a practice, right? I couldn't agree more. It is a practice, but again, like it's always like the chicken or the egg thing, right? It doesn't matter. It's like the whole conversation of when we're talking about like lean. Who do you start with? Do you start with the leaders? Do you start with the front line? Do you start with like it's a
Right.
constant these conversations they go around. It's the point is to start. The
That's
point
it.
is to start, right? And understand what it is you're trying to get out of it. You can't just like aimlessly. It's not like, okay, well, I'm gonna just start doing this tomorrow. It like for what point, right? Like there's got to be that that sense of meaning in it. Like otherwise it just doesn't land. You know, it's just a otherwise it's just a conversation. It's just another checkbox item on the
Yep.
list of things that you want to do, either whether personally or in an organization or whatever it is. It's just not. This stuff isn't that. It's just not that straightforward. But yet it's easy to begin.
Well, as Greg was saying, right? If it appears you're getting it right, you should be worried. And speaking of somebody who has it right, Andres, I mean, like I know you talk about having it figured out all the time at home and at work. So maybe you can enlighten that. No, I'm just kidding. No, but how does that land for you? Like this idea of like getting it right and being worried about that and um yeah.
I think at an earlier age, right, and in my earlier leadership years, definitely it was about getting it right. It was about um, bringing a finished product to the table, and the I guess the more seasoned I get, the more I'm okay with the unfinished product because you have to polish it and polish it and polish it over the years, and even then, when you feel like it's done, it's never done. There's always new learnings, there's always new perspectives, and I think that's it, right? For me, it's been about I could bring in my perspective alone and take steps, but man, the we're better together, right? We're better in a community and learning from each other. So um I think for also for me, it's like the vulnerability, right, can sometimes lead to the sense of I don't want to get advice, at least for me. Like initially, like if I'm vulnerable, there's probably going to be the receiving end. It's probably going to offer a 10 or 15 next steps I should be taking to either fix the issue that I just like shared, right? On. Um, so I think just getting over that, right? Just being self-aware that just depending on the person, right? The vulnerability comes out might be followed by advice, and then just following up with like, I'm not really looking for advice. There's a book called Super Communicators. I don't know if you guys have read it, but
Oh yeah.
it's super good because it puts communication in three or four buckets. But one of the things that it offers and teaches in that book is as you're listening for people being vulnerable, right? Or as you're listening, as people like share something maybe personal that they're struggling with, and instead of giving advice, it's all about asking the questions: do you need support?
Mhm.
Is this are you sharing this with me because you need support? Do you need advice, or do you need a hug, right? And so,
Yeah.
and it's not always, that the person's looking for advice or support. And maybe sometimes they just need a hug, right? But it's being clear, like I think you said, James, just being clear with the purpose of being vulnerable. Like why are you sharing that with me? Is there something that you need? What need isn't being met? And
Mhm.
so
Mm.
I've been over the years just having to learn that when you are vulnerable, there's probably something that's going to be shared afterwards. Unless you have somebody that's super high on the emotional intelligence spectrum that just holds space, right? Sometimes it just
Mm.
so. Anyways, that's kind of what's on my mind with that piece as well. Of just that when you are vulnerable, there might be some sort of a you know a not comeback, but there might be something that then is given as advice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my wife often compliments me on how amazing I am, and I never try to solve her problems ever, ever, ever. So yeah,
Good for you.
no,
Good for
no,
you.
no, absolutely not. That is definitely not the case, actually.
You should write a book.
She
Yeah.
there's this T-shirt that's out there that says "Love me, don't solve me," right? And
Yeah.
I think that is something my wife would be like, ah. So it's a work in progress for me on that for sure. And I think one of those things, Andres, is definitely being able to ask her that question, right? When I'm in a grounded place and like present in the moment, and I'm like, I can feel myself going to that problem solving mode. It's like, okay, what do you need from me right now? Do you just need me to listen, or do you want, like, what would support, or I could ask, like, what would support look like right now?
Yeah.
And often my
Yeah.
wife will, like, go, like, especially if she's like venting or she's got something that's really like hard for her in the moment. Like, she's like, okay, thanks for asking. Or maybe she'll take a deep breath and she's like, oh, okay, yeah, I could just use, could you just do this? Right. Cause sometimes it's just like, I just need you to do this action, please.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes she's like, no, can you just listen for just like 5 minutes? So I think that that's definitely a challenge. And Greg, you bring up a great question there for Andres, and I think for everybody here. Like, listening can often, and especially if I'm maybe stereotyping a little bit as a man, like that can feel like
Mhm.
really, really hard, and maybe there is some vulnerability in that. It's like, oh yeah. But really, like, I think James, I think we said it earlier, like there's something, I feel like there's something strong in that, and that's not like a, like, based on gender. It's just like there's strength in being able to just say, I'm okay with not having to fill the space with my greatness here.
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge, man. The letting go of ego, and like we talk about these things often, but like it is the sort of release that gives when one, you're not trying to fill that space because you don't feel that you need to. It's okay, like you're dropping that it needs to be about you, or that, yeah, maybe you do have the right ideas, but unless you're open to listening and not doing that, that's vulnerability on the flip side. To
Mm.
to kind of, I think what Greg is sort of asking is whether it's listening, or is listening vulnerability. I think it can be. I don't think that, like, I think there's definitely vulnerability in listening. Maybe not so much like on the precise side of the one maybe speaking, but like from the listener perspective, if you're thinking, I should be answering I know the answer to that. I know the answer to
Yeah.
that. Or on
Yeah.
the other side, like, I have no idea how I'm going to offer advice to this. And now you're in your own mind. You're not actually present with the other person. So again, like that lack of ability to listen, because in your own mind you're scripting about how you're either going to be so great and answer this in the most wonderful way that they're going to praise you, or you have no idea what you're going to say. That vulnerability on the inside creates the perfect inner movie that we just start creating the script for, and you have not listened to a thing that the person's actually saying. Right, right. It happens all the time, right? Like, I no matter how much I'm practicing and trying to bring it in, I'm doing that all the time. I'm trying to think, okay, do I have to have, like, what's the answer to this? You're creating the answer. We're not showing up. And so, like,
Mm.
vulnerabilities are almost out the window, because in our own um, uh, struggle within, whether it's our own ego or things that we're dealing with, we haven't showed up. And we can't really be vulnerable because we've made it about us.
I'm wondering, Richard had just chimed in here too, and it was certainly a part of this conversation, that when we were talking about this beforehand, around this term that is used a lot right now, and I think is especially used in lean, around this respect for people, but this term of psychological safety, right? And Richard's sharing about, like, depending on how supportive the team environment is, people will be vulnerable and share what's going on. And my wife, who does work as a consultant as well in terms of conflict mediation, and she has a friend who has this phrase that we talk like we talk about being brave, but at the same time, we talk about the safety. We also need bravery. So I think there's it's a both and, because you can create a safe space as, like, you're continually vulnerable, you're present, you're open, but somebody has to be brave into that space as well. So Andres, I know you work with a lot of, you work with leaders that are maybe senior leaders, and you also work with, frontline folks. So I'm wondering, like, what are your thoughts on this? As I feel like you get to experience this pretty regularly.
People are people, right? People are people. I think that in the simplest kind of way of thinking, right? People have needs, people have wants, and so when I speak to a frontline leader, I don't speak different to an executive, right? In the levels of engagement, the levels of empathetic listening are equally the same. Obviously, there's different things that we need to solve at each level, but I think it's people are people, and I try to bring in that same level of respect every time, right? So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think for me it's about yes, my role is continuous improvement manager. Yes, we're always looking to improve, but at the end of the day, those improvements are led by people. And I don't know if Bob, I don't know if you guys know of Bob Chapman, an author of a better, gosh, I forget the name of the book. I think it's Everybody Matters. Yes, everybody. I was looking over there for my bookcase, but Everybody Matters, and he pretty much states, treat the people in your span of care as somebody's precious sons or daughter, right? And so that's the level of where I'm coming from on a daily basis, whether it's executive or a frontline leader. There are somebody's precious son or daughter that I bring that empathetic listening, and that sense of vulnerability, because it is important to make these connections. If we're expecting improvements from team members, you have to build that relationship first and foremost, before we can ask of anybody of any sort of improvement, honestly.
Yeah.
I got chills there, my guy, with that, like holding them precious, right? I think Katie Anderson, she talked to Isao Yoshino in the book, and they talk about in her Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, about holding precious what it means to be human, right? I like the word many folks use, dignity. I think those are all powerful words, but I think yours is a great picture too of that, like, they're somebody's son or daughter. Mm-hmm. If we look at it that way, how would we treat them differently? And it's definitely, man, this is
yeah, I love that, man. Like my wife's in post-secondary education space, and she has created an environment for her students where they feel safe to come to her office and have vulnerable conversations that often have nothing to do with the education component. It's the factors of life that are holding them back in being fully present to receive the education, and it's holding them back. And the power that I've seen, and from how her students respond to being given that space, and the success that they get after they've had those conversations, is it always leaves me in awe when I see the notes or the cards of gratitude that she receives. And it's not from anything, there's it's not about this great lesson that she gave or that her team gave or anything about that. It was about creating a space to be human, to be heard, to allow them to be the best that they could be. And then you see the impact of that. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. Like it really, really is. And I see some comments around Brene Brown. Yeah, her stuff is fantastic. You know, like it definitely resonates within all these spaces, because if we don't create the ability to have these conversations, there is no great lean culture. There is no, high performing organization, because you've missed the whole human element that actually allows people to be great within themselves for the purpose of the organization's being. And that's why this conversation is so important. Again, we're not going to get it right. We're not going to hit every single spot. We're going to walk away and go, "Oh, I wish I would have made this great quote." But like, it doesn't matter. The point is that we're having the conversation, and like, I
Yeah.
really hope that those that are with us in this conversation in the chat can just take away having these conversations with others, right? You don't have to have the answers, you don't have to have all the pieces together, but we just start having the conversations. Like, next time we're going into a team meeting or there's a big problem that we're trying to solve, maybe instead of jumping into solving the problem, just check in with people and see how we're doing first.
Yes. I think as we kind of are landing the plane here, that's a great way to do that. And thank you, Greg, for jumping in and sharing all of your reflections. And as we're kind of landing here, maybe we can kind of talk about the going forward. What's the takeaway, and maybe just a little thing that we're going to try. James, I think you're right. Like, it's easy for me. I do this reflection at the end of my work day, just try to sit down, get myself grounded, check in with myself and my body. And then lately, my practice has been just to thank myself, like, um, for the work I've done during the day. Like, going through my day, and something as simple as like the ingredients I put in making my wife's protein shake, or the way that I coach somebody and was present for them, or whatever it might be. But the key thing for me is not like, oh man, well, I should have done that, and man, I could have said like that one question would have like gotten them to this place. It's like, oh my gosh, like, that's so easy. I can think of a million different things I could do. So when I get in that space, and my mind goes to, you could have done that, it's like, nope. Back in, what did you do? Right? And I think that's the thing that we're wanting to, hopefully, offer in these last couple of minutes, and maybe something for you to think about. So I'm wondering, Andres, like, what's the piece for you that you're taking away, and please feel free to drop in the chat what it is for you, like what you're taking away, and maybe one little thing that you're gonna, like, try.
Yeah, I think for me, let's see. I mean, we talked on many topics here. What really resonated with me is that vulnerability does not equal weakness, and so how that shows up, right? Sometimes I hold back on things, not share
Mm,
things, because again, I'm maybe fearing the fact that it might be seen as a weakness, and so more actionable would be next time I'm feeling this sense of I need to share that vulnerability or whatever's going on through my mind, whether it's a tough conversation I had at home, or dealing with something, and just being just sharing that, right? Again, it doesn't have to be like this, long story about my whole day, but what is really on my mind, and why is that preventing me from showing up 100%? So
it's good. Yeah, I think that's a great way. Like, and we can do that at home. We can do that with a coworker or a friend like that. That's brilliant. James, what's sticking with you?
I think, just the this is just such a strong reinforcement for the importance of when things don't go the way you plan, just take a moment to reflect back and have some compassion for maybe how things went, but learn from it and just see if there was something that you missed from just the human perspective, not jumping into like the technical side of it, but did I show up to be just genuine in that moment, or was I trying to be something else? And I think just
Mm,
that reminder to myself to make sure I'm doing that.
mm, yeah, and I think that's good. Yeah, Andy, thank you so much for chiming in as well. Like, this has been a really great conversation. Um, being intentional and human in all of your interactions. Um, I think that's so powerful. For me, I'm taking away what you said, Andres, is like looking at every person, right, as someone else's son or daughter, right? Their
Mhm.
precious, son or daughter. And I think that when we do that, then we can come in, and what that can be somebody that you have a hard time with. There are
Mhm.
certain individuals in our, you know, climate right now in our broader world that I struggle with seeing them as that, right? But there can also be people like if they're in our organization, maybe they're the CEO or the COO or whatever, and you're like, oh man. But then if you go, oh man, there's someone's son or daughter, they're just a human, right? And how can I relate to that? Or if you got somebody that you're leading on the front line, like doing the same thing. So want to thank you, James, and you, Andres, for jumping in. And Paul, I know you're here in spirit, so thank you for being a part of these conversations. And we'll see where this goes. If this is something we circle back, would love to hear from you. If you feel like this was helpful, we'd love to know what the most valuable part was for you. So if you'd be so kind as to drop that in the comments, even after or when you're watching this, just let us know so we can understand if this is the kind of conversations that folks in our community would love to continue to have. And then we can just see where that goes from here. So thank you, James. Thank you, Andres, for being here today. And thanks to everybody who dropped in the comments and was watching, whether you dropped in the comments or like or not, you're just here. Thank you so much for being here and being open to being more vulnerable. And yeah, it's there's more to come, always more. But we're thankful for sure as well and content in this, right, James? Dang it.
Absolutely, man. We appreciate
Right.
you, and we appreciate you holding this space for us, like
Yeah.
allowing for these conversations, right? Where we're breaking up the sort of normal sort of conversation, and appreciate that you're giving this platform.
You're definitely a leader in this space, Sam. So I appreciate you and appreciate your time. And James, thank you for adding color to the conversation, like you always do. I mean, if there's other topics that listeners are interested in, of like bringing in community to, like open to hear from that as well. Just what other topics are out there that are just intriguing or interesting? Maybe, man, we have some gaps here. Let's talk about it openly. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
curious, right?
Brilliant. Brilliant, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend, wherever you are. Enjoy this wonderful fall season if you're in the States. Otherwise, wherever you're at, we're sending you all of our love. Have a fantastic day and weekend. Be well.